Hi, I'm Steve Cooper with Christian Action Alliance. We're in the set of our new series, The Christian Guide to Dragon Slaying. This series is an exploration into a mindset of serving God that will help us to reclaim our children's future and to restore a nation. So, in this introductory podcast, it seemed good to go back to where this journey began for me, long ago in my childhood. I think you'll find it interesting and encouraging. It's funny how little things in our life can completely change our destinies. Being blessed, or in some ways perhaps cursed, with a detailed memory of my early childhood, I've been able to see this cause and effect. It's in all of our lives, whether we remember the details or not. Case in point was my friend Jack. I played with him when I was about 2 or 3 years old, and I remember him well. I used to push him down into a box and turn this crank that played a tune, and he would pop out of the box and bob around. We loved the game, and we did it over and over again. It sort of felt like he was alive, but one day I noticed this little latch on the box and how at pop goes the weasel, it would move even if the lid was already open. So, further examination let me spot a rip in the gown, and so I started pulling it apart on the fabric, and I discovered his soul, a spring. So I tore the gown all the way around, kind of pulled the spring loose from the bottom of the box, and so Jack was actually able to jump free. But, I killed Jack. I killed Jack. Not like you kill a person, but my probing had discovered his lack of life, which was worse. Now, you're likely thinking, I click here to hear a serious discussion, and he starts talking about his childhood toy. What kind of cosmic significance can a Jack-in-the-Box have? Likely not a lot, unless this was just the first step to my finding a strong family resemblance to Jack. The second step came a few years later, at about 5 or 6. A friend of the family, Millie Woods, an exceptionally nice lady, was teasing me, who at the time was an exceptionally volatile child. So I blew up at her and told her that I wanted to kill her and feed her to the hogs. Not being satisfied with this, I added, I hope the hogs get diarrhea. Then you'll be nothing but hog diarrhea. Yes, I was a charmer. My mother and I left Millie's house sooner than we planned, and on the way to the car, I got to thinking, how could Millie be turned into just hog poop? Where would Millie be? Why, I could be turned into hog poop. It was a mind-boggling experience. I wondered what Millie was and what I was, and everyone really, because if we can all become just hog poop. One Halloween, my mom decorated with the cardboard Halloween skeletons, and that was another small step. I wondered if that was really me. Feeling through my skin, it all seemed accurate. I was sticks and hinges. At around 6, I got to watch when they aired the first televised heart surgery, and this is where it became very real to me that I had a pump. Step by step, I was changing from a magical being. It began to seem that I may be more complicated than my old friend Jack, but we were definitely distant cousins. We had both been made from an assemblage of parts. You might be wondering about my religious upbringing. I was tutored well in religion by my mother, and I had very deep religious feelings. My religion was Santa Claus. He represented all that was good and pure. He became to me like Jesus is to the Christians, only kind of a Jesus in red velvet who hands out goodies. I've seen churches where they get the two mixed up. But at 4 years old, the jolly old elf died in exactly the same way that had taken my friend Jack, dissolved into never-wasness. This happened when my dad told me that nothing can go faster than the speed of light. So one morning, as my sister and I were warming ourselves by the wall heater, this subject came up, and she explained that airplane propellers were going the speed of light, and that's why we couldn't see them. I'd watched planes many times at the little airport across the street from my grandparents in Quartz Hill, and propellers turn fast, but not all that fast. I realized that Santa would never make it to all the millions of houses around the world in one night if he was limited to such a slow speed. I'm not sure why flying reindeer didn't tip me off. So confronting my mother, I told her that she had lied about Santa and she was also lying about God. So I no longer believed in God either. Later, when I mentioned the whole propeller thing to my dad, he told me that propellers go faster than the speed of sight, not the speed of light. But Santa was already dead. Plus now our eyes were faulty instruments. So they lied to us too. It was just a difficult week. The fall of Santa really immunized me against religion. Like the old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I thought a lot about God after this, wondering if he was real or not. But by the 8th grade, I'd settled on a more manageable belief system, free from disappearing gods. I believed that everything was atomic and things had simply been sparked to life by some lightning strikes. And from there it oozed through the slime stage, crawled into a reptile, warmed up to a mammal, and after monkeying around for a while, became us. There was nothing to us except atoms, and life was without meaning or purpose. No rules to adhere to, no good or bad, no God, just chemistry. Pedaling my bike through an orchard in the 8th grade, I began reviewing my universe. I thought about how love and hate were just chemical reactions, and how nothing matters. Even the Holocaust, which greatly disturbed me, was nothing, because the people were just atoms getting rearranged. There is no equation that says this times that equals morality, or this divided by that equals purpose. It was all a cosmic accident, perhaps a cosmic joke, and all my being was nothing. But then a very simple question hit me. First, it embarrassed me that it had never occurred to me before. The question was, how am I aware of myself? How do I have consciousness? Atoms should never be conscious, no matter how many or how complex the structure. So where did this self-awareness come from? The idea hit me so hard that it began to break up the whole world I had so carefully constructed. I had to get off my bike. It shook me up so bad. Sitting on the ground in the orchard, my hands were shaking. Everything in my world was being torn apart. I realized that somehow there had to be more than atoms. There had to be another component of the universe. And I wondered if there could possibly be a spiritual world. It was obvious that I was a machine. I had cameras for eyes and microphones for ears. But could it be that this machine was haunted? Did I have a spirit? Was I atoms and a ghost? In high school, I built an electronic device to test the Baxter effect, where plants react to things like destroying other plants in a nearby sealed room. I was searching for the spiritual part of life. My experiments weren't very conclusive, so I decided that if I'm a spiritual being, I will have to be the instrument to explore the spiritual world. I checked out some books on auto-hypnosis and began to go into trances and hopefully find the spiritual dimension to reality. At first, nothing seemed to be happening, but eventually I could feel a presence. And I wasn't sure if it was real or imagined. The presence was not a good presence. They seemed predatory, like being in a shark tank. But I just had to know, so I pushed on. And it became more real. And I began to change. I would say really mean things to people in sudden outburst. Things that can never be taken back. And such evil was actually beginning to satisfy something in me. I'd never been a mean person. And also, horrible, macabre nightmares began to fill up my nights so that I couldn't sleep. It got so bad that I would sleep in another room because going into my bedroom would remind me of the previous night. It became sort of a game of musical beds. I even began to sleep out in the Corvair van my dad had made into a camper. I was losing my mind. I tried extreme exercise and taking cold showers to build up my willpower, but I was losing. It was horrible as my mind began to twist into a person I didn't even know. Then at Yuba City High School, we had an assembly. The speaker was a physicist named Lambert Dolphin, and he spoke about some of his science experiments and went on to tell us how he had come to know Jesus. I don't know how that happened at a public school. Now, his talk was very thought-provoking, so much so that I went to a few youth group meetings at a local church. And this is where I met my wife, Liz. I was interested in her, but at the time she wisely wanted nothing to do with me. I also met Susan Wright, who invited me to her house, and on my visit, she told me how Jesus had died for my sins. And I thought this odd and told her if it seemed wrong to ask anyone else to pay for my sins. If I had sins, I would pay for them myself. She didn't think this would, work out so well. The pastor of the church, Edgar Nelson, he talked to me and gave me a booklet to read. And these things were interesting, but all the changes required seemed a bit expensive, even if it was true. My life was becoming a nightmare, like my dreams. At last, at 17 years old, I decided to kill myself. The method chosen was to take my dad's camper van out that night and crash it into a tree. Nobody would blame themselves for a suicide. I took my last walk down a country road near our house and began to think about Lambert Dolphin's talk and the other people who had reached out to me. I sat on a plow in the orchard and talked to God, asking for help. Not wanting to get a wrong number and having little knowledge in this area, I called out specifically to Lambert Dolphin's God. Walking back to the van, I continued my conversation and began to negotiate with God about becoming a Christian. It suddenly occurred to me that I had nothing to negotiate with. I was going to die in a few minutes. I had no collateral. I was in the universe's minus column. Getting back to the van, I sat down on the bed and I told God that if he would take away this nightmare, he could have the rest of my life to do with as he pleased. I would be totally his. It was a living suicide. And I fell backward onto the bed and saw these horrible nightmare things come screeching out of me. And I was so angry. I turned to God and now I had totally lost my mind. My only hope was that I would still have enough sense to kill myself. Because if not, I knew I'd spend the rest of my life under heavy medication in a mental institution. But it all ended as suddenly as it had begun. I then saw Jesus on the cross and understood deeply what he had done for me. I knew he had not pulled me from this horrible pit I was in, but he had gone into that pit and pushed me out ahead of himself. I wasn't a crier, but I started crying, and I told him I was so sorry he had to do this for me. Then it was like I had been in a dark prison cell, tormented and hopeless, when all the walls just unexpectedly fell down, and I was now bathing in the sunlight of a beautiful park. I felt happy, which is something I never expected to feel again. The next day when my friends saw me, they said, "What happened to you, Cooper? You look really different." And I was, and I still am. My life changed quickly. I eventually started dating Liz, and we got married. We have 4 children, and now we have 19 grandchildren, with many others who claim us as their grandparents. And my life is now filled with the depth of this new living. It's such a different world from the sheer darkness that once filled my life. Or should I say that once emptied my life. Now, there are a handful of people who helped save my life that day. And if you've come to know Jesus, there were undoubtedly such people in your life who made such a difference. And this series is about how to become one of these people to your neighbors and for our society. In the second podcast, we'll be talking about the path that my life followed after this event, because this series will bring out a lot of ideas that will be challenging. And it seems important to the message for you to really know who the messenger is. And this will give you the tools to help you judge what I'm saying. Thanks for watching. I hope you find our series valuable to your relationship to God and that it'll make a real difference in your life.